So I met with a friend a few weeks ago and I wanted to share our conversation because I think that it may be able to help a lot of people who are facing similar challenges in life. To provide a little bit of a backstory, my friend is a sales professional and he's been in this field since graduation about 5 years ago. Despite having reached a reasonable level of financial success and stability, along with the fact that his current trajectory promises a pretty rewarding and lucrative career if he were to stay the course, he continues to struggle with finding a sense of purpose, and this is a feeling that is all too familiar to me. So in this video, I really just wanted to impart some wisdom from lessons learned in my own personal experiences in a similar situation, and so here's the story of why I left my job and why you should too. The story starts back in the fall of 2015 when I got out of the Marine Corps, and at this point I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew that I wanted to go back to school and further my education. So I kind of just fell into a business major because I knew that it would get me a good job after graduation, and indeed it did. But the problem was that I delved into every subspecialty of business that I could get my hands on: marketing, finance, accounting, management, everything that I could think of, part-time jobs, internships. I kept exploring the field, waiting for that sort of eureka moment where something would click and I'd resonate with it and say, cool, this is the thing that I'm meant to do with my life. That moment never really arrived, and I struggled to find a sense of purpose. But I stayed the course, I graduated, and following graduation, I landed a great job out in California in sales with a very reputable company, great coworkers, fantastic pay, especially right out the gate, and tremendous leadership. But despite all of these things, I was absolutely miserable. This just was not the right field for me. Business held no passion for me, and as a result, I only lasted 6 months before I left this job. At this point, you might be asking yourself, why would you leave such a good job with great pay, coworkers, leadership, and all that? And the answer in its simplest form boils down to I just wasn't passionate about what I was doing, and I was terrified of being mediocre, terrified of the mundane, and so I left. And this brings up a really important point that I want to make. I think that it's an all too often occurrence in the sort of societal algorithm that people are generally expected to graduate from college and know what they want to do for the rest of their lives, and I don't think this is realistic at all. I think it's great if that's you and you do graduate and you know what you want to do and you just land that perfect job and you stay there for the rest of your career. That's fantastic. More power to you, but for the majority of us, I don't think this is realistic. I think you have to get out there and explore to really find that thing that sets your soul on fire. But I think more often than not, what tends to happen is that people graduate, whether due to that expectation or otherwise, and they fall into a job that gives them financial stability. They're not necessarily passionate, but they're quote unquote comfortable, and then boom, in the blink of an eye, 20 years goes by or more, and you are stuck in a job that you don't like, that should have never become a career. And the thought of this as I was sitting in my cubicle in California absolutely terrified me, so I left. After leaving, I began exploring the world of science and medicine, and I don't necessarily want to dive into the why on that in this particular video. I'll probably save that for a future video, but essentially what you need to know is that I finally did find my place in the world in medicine, and I'm incredibly happy that I made this change because switching from business, as it turns out, was the best decision of my life. However, reaching this point was anything but easy, so if you're contemplating a similar life change, I kind of want to detail some of my own struggles because I think the cons can stack up pretty high pretty quickly when you're just inside your head. So just know that it wasn't easy for me either, but it is possible. And so when I left, I had uncertainty, I had doubts, and I had fears. I didn't know, at least at the time, how I was going to pay for these classes. I honestly questioned if I was smart enough to even get into medical school, and I feared the reaction that my family and friends might have to such a drastic life change, although it turns out that they were incredibly supportive. I know a lot of the objections that you're going to raise for yourself if you're in a similar situation relate to time and expense, so I want to detail some of my own struggles with this to sort of illuminate the massive undertaking that this was, but again to sort of illustrate that it is possible. And so when I left the sales job in California, I was making $65,000 a year in base pay plus sales incentives that were pretty solid. I don't have an exact number, but just based on what I was making in the first 6 months, I was probably on track to make a total of somewhere around $80,000 in my first year, which again, straight out of college, 6 months in, not bad. And I left this behind to make $8 an hour as a medical scribe in an emergency department. So if I'm being honest, that did hurt. but it was entirely worth it because it was all about the experience and not about the money. Additionally, as a business major, I had taken 0 science classes, so I needed roughly 2 years of science courses to amass the prereqs necessary to apply and get into medical school. And on a side note there, this isn't meant to attack the business major because I was one, but having gone through that and these science pre-med courses, the rigor of these classes is just on a whole nother level, and anyone that's taken organic chemistry, for instance, knows what I'm talking about. Furthermore, in addition to taking that massive pay cut, so now making $8 an hour and working my tail off over that 2-year period for these science pre-medical courses so that I could maintain a high GPA to actually get into medical school, but also just to learn as much as I possibly could because it was super interesting material, I also had to prepare for the MCAT, which is the Medical College Admissions Test, and if you're a pre-med, you already know it's a beast of a test. This test presented as another substantial obstacle in the road, so there's a lot of pressure on it. It's a 7-hour-long test that ultimately helps to decide whether or not you actually get into medical school. So I spent about 6 months studying for this, and it was a hard road, but I did fine and ultimately got accepted. And so if you're in a similar situation where you're contemplating a big life change like this, and those things are stacking up in your head, the uncertainty, the doubt, and the fear, just know that those things were with me throughout this whole process. And while it wasn't easy, it is possible. Circling back to my friend who's facing a similar dilemma, my advice to him was the following. If you're unhappy in your current field and you suspect that you would be happier doing something else, start exploring. You owe it to yourself to at least start looking. You don't have to leave your job on the spot, but start on whatever level is feasible for you. Expose yourself to other fields that you think you might be interested in. This trial and error process may not reveal your passion right away, but knowing what you're not meant to do is just as informative potentially as knowing what you are meant to do. Speaking to my own experience, this was certainly a trial and error process. I stumbled into many things that I wasn't meant to do before finally settling in my place in medicine, and I know that you can do the same. And that's it for today's video. I hope that some of you out there found it helpful. If you did, please comment below and please share it, and I'll see you in the next one.